Welcome to fatigue management. Fatigue is an all too common occurrence in our fast-paced society. Most anyone can be susceptible to fatigue. Whether you work in a commercial business or for the government, from office employees to military contractors, fatigue can be a breeding ground for mishaps, incidents, and accidents with tragic or near-tragic. When you finish this course, you will know some places where important information on fatigue can be found, and you will be able to identify factors that can lead to fatigue, along with some strategies for coping with fatigue. What is fatigue? Select each term to see its definition. The U.S. National Drowsiness, Apathy, Profound fatigue. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, currently does not address fatigue in their Code of Federal Regulations, or CFR. This does not mean OSHA considers fatigue to be a minor issue. Under OSHA's General Duty Clause, fatigue may be cited in a violation, especially when a serious injury or a death is the result of the lack of rest during strenuous work. In addition, OSHA may indirectly address fatigue when referencing specific job roles with their associated hazards. For example, emergency responders may face extended, unusual work shifts. The National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, or NIOSH, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers both address and publish information on fatigue useful for a wide range of workplaces. Requirements Manual EM 385-1-1, which includes a chapter on fatigue management plans, or FMPs, in Section 1 under Program Management. In fact, fatigue management is an important requirement for any work that is performed for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Whether working as a civilian, contractor, or as part of the military, all missions under the command of the Chief of Engineers must address occupational exposure to fatigue. Commercial driving was one job that first attracted the attention of regulators to the hazards of fatigue during long work shifts. Although this is not strictly a course on Department of Transportation regulations, you should know that an agency of the DOT, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, or FMCSA, enforces hour limitations for drivers of commercial vehicles. If you are interested in more information, click the links provided to visit the official websites of the DOT and the FMCSA. Aside from the federal and state regulations, standards, and industry best practices we've just covered, it's important to know that many states have labor and employment laws that specifically address work shifts and employee work hour limitations. Thus, if you have a question about work shifts or employee work hour limitations, it's best to work with someone from your Human Resources Department. Preventing fatigue is important to both you and your coworkers, but can be difficult due to work shifts, job roles, responsibilities, and personal lifestyles. Prevention begins with recognizing the signs and symptoms of fatigue. You and anyone who is your supervisor or manager should receive regular training on fatigue hazard recognition and how to properly address and manage this hazardous condition. Commercial driving was one job that first attracted the attention of regulators to the hazards of fatigue during long work shifts. Fatigue is a common occurrence for any person in any industry and can be a breeding ground for accidents and incidents. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, currently does not address fatigue in their Code of Federal Regulations. However, they do indirectly address fatigue when referencing job roles and their associated hazards. There are two organizations that do address and publish information on worker fatigue. The first is the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, or NIOSH. The other good resource for worker fatigue is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Safety and Health Requirements Manual, EM 385-1-1. The latest revision includes a new chapter on fatigue management plans in Section 1, Program Management. Aside from federal and state regulations, standards, and industry best practices, it's important to note that many states have labor and employment laws that specifically address work shifts and employee work hour limitations. You and your manager or supervisor should receive regular training on fatigue hazard recognition and how to properly address and manage this condition. Now let's examine some common causes of fatigue and its safety and health effects. Fatigue is a naturally occurring condition of the human body defined as weariness or exhaustion from labor, exertion, or stress. Fatigue can be brought on by both personal and work circumstances. It can also be brought on by physical and psychological conditions. Fatigue can be brought on and increased by conditions at home, as well as other personal issues or conditions, such as working a second or third job, night school or studying for a degree, child or elder care, the stress of a relationship, a separation or divorce, and financial stress. Fatigue at work can stem from a multitude of factors: demanding work shifts and schedules, emergency care and response work, such as what doctors and nurses, police, firefighters, and maintenance personnel commonly face, working in extreme heat or cold, workforce shortages, which may burden employees with more or longer duration work responsibilities, labor-intensive work, the lack of work, and work involving repetitive motion. Workers who operate vehicles and machinery are commonly subject to high amounts of fatigue. There are also a multitude of physical and psychological factors that can increase fatigue. They include poor overall health, such as being overweight and out of shape, or suffering from an acute or chronic injury or illness, the effects of smoking and drinking alcohol, prescription drug use, especially ones that can cause drowsiness, sleep disorders, depression, anger, and other similar disorders. Although fatigue can have direct effects on your health, such as feeling drowsy or sick, and can even lead to acute and chronic conditions, such as heart disease, it can also have an indirect effect on your overall work performance. Fatigue can decrease awareness or impair decision-making ability, and can cause erratic behavior and hamper communication, all of which may lead to a possible mishap with potentially tragic results. Sometimes fatigue can go unnoticed, making you less aware of surrounding people, conditions, and hazards. Those who become less aware of their surroundings become a liability to themselves and to others. Awareness can be thought of as being similar to the following: perception, knowledge, recognition, understanding, and consciousness. Do you think these are important aspects of safety and health? Fatigue can also affect one's decision-making abilities. Good decision-making requires clear thought and concentration, two factors that are severely affected by fatigue. Fatigue can also increase the temptation to make a rushed decision, as your brain will simply focus on the need for your body to get rest, placing less priority on anything else requiring thought. We all know and have experienced how fatigue can severely affect our behavior and attitude. From the time we were born, our bodies are programmed to require rest at certain intervals. Our bodies respond negatively when this rest is denied. Just as an overtired infant commonly reacts to fatigue in the form of crying and tantrums, adults can have a similar variety of behavioral changes caused by fatigue. Behavioral changes include anger, confusion, impatience, extreme mood swings, despair, withdrawal away from others, and a lack of caring or concern. Communication skills are also greatly affected by fatigue. Fatigue can create confusion, which leads to miscommunication, or to forgetting to communicate altogether. A fatigued person's instructions or acknowledgments are usually confusing. In person, someone who is fatigued might avoid eye contact. Three-way communication should be a common practice, especially in work environments where fatigue can be common. Here's how it works. Listen to what is said. Repeat back what you've been told. Then ask for confirmation that you've understood what you've been told. Remember, listen, repeat, confirm. Someone suffering from fatigue may have one or more signs or symptoms. The list of signs and symptoms shown here comes from the Department of Health and Human Services, Victoria, Australia. Sleep disorders, such as insomnia and sleep apnea, are directly and greatly related to fatigue. According to a 2008 report by the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Strokes, an estimated 40 million Americans are diagnosed with a chronic, long-term sleep disorder each year, and 20 million Americans have occasional sleep problems. Sleep apnea is one of many sleep disorders that may disqualify someone who might otherwise be authorized to operate heavy equipment or vehicles, or who might occupy any other critical position. It's important to know that sleep apnea is a condition that is covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. Know your rights under the ADA, which in many cases mandates that an employer provide and pay for treatment, and also prevents the employee from wrongful termination. Sleep studies are used to accurately determine if someone suffers from sleep apnea. The disorder is treatable once diagnosed. Intense fatigue that doesn't improve with bed rest may be a sign of chronic fatigue syndrome, also known as systemic exertion intolerance disease. Fatigue from CFS may get worse from physical or mental exertion. You should see a doctor if you have been experiencing severe chronic fatigue over a period of 6 months, and the fatigue interferes with daily life or work. Other symptoms may accompany the fatigue, such as muscle pain, pain in the joints without swelling or redness, or a frequently reoccurring sore throat. The causes of CFS are unknown at this time. Fatigue is a natural response of the human body defined as weariness or exhaustion from labor, exertion, or stress, which can be brought on by both personal and work circumstances. At work, fatigue can be caused by a multitude of factors such as demanding work shifts and schedules, emergency care and response work, such as what doctors, nurses, police, firefighters, and maintenance personnel commonly face, working in extreme heat and cold, workforce shortages, labor-intensive work or lack of work, and repetitive motion work. A sleep disorder is one physical factor that can lead to fatigue. Approximately 40 million people in the U.S. suffer from some kind of sleep disorder. Fatigue can have direct effects on health, making a person feel drowsy or sick, and leading to acute and chronic conditions such as heart disease. It can also have an indirect effect on a person's overall work performance by decreasing awareness, causing erratic behavior, and hampering communication. Fatigue can especially affect one's decision-making abilities because good decision-making requires clear thought and concentration. One way to mitigate the effects of fatigue is to practice three-way communication. Listen, repeat, confirm, especially in work environments where fatigue can be common. We live and work in a 24-hour society where goods and services are produced and provided at all hours of the day and night. Shift work, especially for those who work long, demanding, and rotating schedules, increases the likelihood of fatigue. Shift work is defined as work outside a typical 9-to-5 workday, depending on the industry. Many jobs found in these industries cannot just simply shut down or accommodate normal schedules. Public safety, including police and fire protection, military defense, healthcare, transportation, and public utilities such as electrical power, water, and telecommunications. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has conducted many research studies on the topic of shift work, which you can review by going to their website, www.bls.gov. In 2004, the BLS estimated that approximately 27 million people of the U.S. workforce were engaged in some type of shift work. This number is certain to have increased over the years. Click link to read the full report. Studies have found that younger workers, mostly single, engage in more shift work than their older counterparts. This is particularly concerning as younger workers tend to be more prone to safety and health incidents. Many of these younger workers are also students or single parents, which encompass two groups that are already at a higher risk for fatigue on the job. There are additional stress factors associated with shift work, especially for those who work afternoon and evening shifts. The list of these stress factors includes limited time with family and friends, not being able to attend personal or social events, not being present for children's needs, not being able to get appropriate medical care such as doctor and dental appointments, and disruption to normal sleep patterns. Are you a shift work employee? If you are, consider this. Contrary to popular belief, your body never fully adapts to shift work. To address fatigue and the associated safety issues stemming from shift work, ask yourself these questions. Is your shift permanent or rotating? How long is your shift? How many shifts are you working before a rest day? How many rest days are on weekends? Do you work overtime? How much rest do you take between shifts? How much rest do you take during shifts? And lastly, is your work schedule regular and predictable? The fatigue factors surrounding your answers to some of these questions may be out of your control. If so, work with your employer to address the serious effects that shift work can have on your work performance. Shift work, especially for those who work long, demanding, and rotating schedules, can significantly increase the likelihood of worker fatigue. Depending on the industry, shift work is defined as jobs outside of a typical 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. work schedule, including public safety, such as police and fire protection, military defense, healthcare, transportation, and public utilities, such as electrical power, water, and telecommunications. Studies have also found that younger workers engage in more shift work than their older counterparts and tend to be more prone to safety and health incidents. Contrary to popular belief, your body never fully adapts to shift work. To effectively manage and improve shift work schedules when addressing fatigue and associated worker safety and health, employers should consider some of these recommendations. Avoid permanent and non-rotating night shifts. Keep consecutive night shifts to a minimum. Avoid quick shift changes. Plan some free weekends for the employee. Keep long work shifts and overtime to a minimum. Keep the schedule regular and predictable as possible. And examine shift start, end times, and rest breaks. Now let's look at some industry best practices for coping with shift work fatigue. NIOSH has conducted a vast amount of research on shift work and fatigue. Although written in 1997, one publication in particular remains important and contains a wealth of information. Much of what follows with regard to coping with shift work comes from this document titled Plain Language About Shift Work. Click link to view and download the complete PDF document. Most people need to get enough sleep to make the next day productive. If you are someone who works on a shift, getting enough sleep may be difficult. Most people need between 7 and 8 hours of sleep, with the biggest majority needing at least 6 hours. Have a regular routine. Say you work a night shift. Some people who work a night shift get their needed sleep in one long period, while others use 2 shorter periods. It all depends on what you need and what works for you. If you do use 2 sleep periods, try to get to bed as soon as possible after your shift, then sleep in the afternoon before starting the next shift. It's a natural tendency to need sleep in the mid-afternoon. Try taking advantage of this tendency. We all have a natural regularity to our sleep cycles, called a circadian rhythm, that tells us when to sleep and when to be awake. For those that do not perform shift work, their circadian rhythm tells them to be asleep at night and awake during the day. This is a problem for night workers who must sleep during the day, when their circadian rhythm tells them to be awake, and for day workers who must wake up very early to go to work. Both types of shifts may cause sleep to be cut short, resulting in a feeling of tiredness or sleepiness. Thus, your circadian rhythm may disrupt your sleep patterns until your body adjusts to how you work. For example, you may need extra sleep until you become used to working on a new shift. Once you are used to night shift work, switching back to a day shift may cause the same problem. One approach is to sleep briefly after the night shift and then try to stay awake for the remainder of the day to go to sleep at night. What about exercise? Regular exercise is good for overall health. In moderation, it can help with tiredness. When to exercise is important. Too much exertion before a job involving physical labor will make the job more difficult. On the other hand, some form of aerobic exercise, such as a walk, jog, a swim, or a bike ride, can be good before work. For example, if you work a night shift, try to get some exercise in the afternoon. But don't forget to stretch. As a general rule, avoid exercise up to 3 hours before going to bed. Relaxation after work is important as well. Everyone relaxes differently. Choose a way to relax that works for you. Research has shown that caffeine intake in moderation can help with alertness. But try not to drink more than 3 cups of coffee or 3 caffeinated beverages a day. Drinking 5 or 6 cups may impact your ability to sleep. Similarly, 1 or 2 drinks containing alcohol after work with food may be fine for relaxation, but alcohol should never be consumed at work. In addition, alcohol will not help with sleep. In fact, use of alcohol before sleep will cause the sleep to be less effective. Avoid alcohol up to 2 hours before going to bed. Most people need to get enough sleep to make the next day productive. To get enough sleep, have a regular sleep routine. When working on a night shift, some people sleep in one long period, while others use 2 shorter periods. Use what works for you and stick to it. Eventually, your body will begin to adjust to a new circadian rhythm. One strategy for coping with a new shift is to get extra sleep until your body adjusts. Other factors will impact how well you are able to adjust and cope with shift work. For example, moderate aerobic exercise before work can help with staying alert. Avoid heavy exercise, which may make you too tired, especially if your work involves heavy labor. Heavy exercise may even have the opposite effect when it's time for sleep, causing you to be overstimulated. Avoid caffeine. Try not to drink more than 3 cups of caffeinated beverages a day, particularly near bedtime. Alcohol will not help with sleep. In fact, drinking too much alcohol too close to sleep will make your sleep less effective. As a reminder, here are a few resources on fatigue that were referenced in this course. The NIOSH website. NIOSH's Plain Language About Shift Work and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Safety and Health Requirements Engineering Manual, EM 385-1-1. Fatigue is an all too common occurrence in our fast-paced society. Most everyone is susceptible. This has been a brief introduction into the causes and effects of fatigue, as well as some ways for avoiding and coping with it. Many factors, physical, psychological, direct and indirect, can impact your level of fatigue. Getting enough sleep is the most important way to combat it. Yet, something as simple as getting enough sleep may not be an easy thing to do. You are particularly susceptible to fatigue if you are a shift worker, someone who works outside a 9-to-5 workday. Thus, many of the coping strategies covered in this course were discussed in the context of shift work. However, most, if not all of the strategies are applicable across all types of work schedules, whether you work at night or rise early in the morning. Thank you for taking this course. Stay safe.